Jada, you good?
Is there any way you can do it a little more?
Is my mic
Griff, what do you make of 49 regular season wins, but ending the season like that in the playoffs and the totality of that?
Yeah, so obviously disappointed to be doing this today. I think the 49 wins that you alluded to are part of several things that happened this year that would have led you to believe we'd be playing deep into the summer at times. I think there were times where very large chunks of the season for months at a time where we had the second best net rating in the league, and were it not for Boston, we would have looked like the best team in the league for stretches. And I also think we had stretches where you could see we had a lot of room for growth and a lot of improvement we needed to make. Unfortunately, we continued to have injury issues and certainly had a big one at the wrong time. But there's so many positives we take out of the season. You know, it's really unfortunate this season ended in the way it did. You'd like a season to crescendo to a moment that lets everybody know how good your season really was. We had the #1 road record in the NBA. We were 6th in defensive rating and 6th in net rating. We had moments where we really showed what we could be, but I think we did it often in fits and starts, which is disappointing. You know, we're in a historically good Western Conference. I read something the other day that I think is true. It's the first time a conference has had 10 teams above 500 at the same time. Our record this year would have been good for 3rd in the West last year, would have been good for 3rd in the East this year. It's a very competitive conference. And so I think whereas in the past we've always erred on the side of continuity, and our takeaway has always been, let's see this group healthy. I think we've seen it enough. I think we had some really, really good opportunity to see Zion play a career high in games. I think we saw it for segments of time well enough to understand that we've got a lot of work to do. And again, because it is a historically good Western Conference, there's teams that didn't make the playoffs that are going to get radically better this offseason. We need to do the same. And I think you'll see a real sense of urgency from all of us to do that.
Looking at next season, what are some of the biggest needs you think you need to address?
I think it's more than just specific needs. It's really just about growth in every area of the organization. I think last year we talked a lot and too much was put on the medical side and the performance side, and we didn't talk enough about the other things that we were working on. This entire building is going to undergo a transformation this offseason, figuratively and literally. Really big projects here that ownership is investing in. Mrs. Benson's really excited about changing the look and feel of this. I think that will happen on and off the court. But in terms of specific needs to address, we haven't even had our time to visit with our players individually yet. So until we do that, I don't really want to get into specifics about player-related changes.
When do you start kind of that process? So you don't do, I know you don't have a knee-jerk, but do you take a week off? Do you kind of map out when we sit down with Mrs. Benson and kind of plan out the future, who's here, who's not, what our vision is? Like, what is your process?
Yeah, that's from a front office perspective, it's an ongoing process, right? I mean, we're doing it constantly. I think you get yourself in trouble if you try to do anything as a reaction to one particular series or one particular turn of events. If we did that when we came back from the Western Conference road trip we ended the season with, which was just an absolute meat grinder, and you win four in a row, and you play 3 games in 3.5 days, and you play the Lakers, would we tend to the side of believing we're what we were when we won those road games, or are we what we were when we lost to the Lakers? You just can't do that. This is a much larger, more thorough process than that. So we'll take a lot of time to go through it as a group. You know, we don't tend to do that during the year as much and as often with every interest group in the organization together. We tend to do it as a front office. So this will be a good time for us to really dive deep with the whole group. But I want to be really, really clear. This is not going to be a summer of complacency. It's time to get better.
Hey, Greg, what's kind of your assessment about the job Willie did? Was it too early to say?
Say that again. I'm sorry.
Willie Green. How do you kind of assess it?
Yeah, I think the coaching staff did a really good job with a really difficult situation. I think when you've got guys in and out of the lineup in the way we did, that's harder than just having guys not play. I think in the first part of the season, we really performed well under adversity, and that propelled us to some wins that probably got us further ahead towards the end. I think we went through a stretch there where we lost B.I. and Jose at exactly the wrong time. And then we lost Z at exactly the wrong time. And I think throughout that, Willie stayed very, very authentically himself and stayed in a space where guys knew what he was going to bring to the table every day. I think that's hard when you've got that much change. And at the same time, I think Willie would be the first person to tell you there's room for them to grow and get better as well. And I expect that will happen as well.
We saw a pretty decent sample size of CJ Zion and BI together. You guys lost those minutes. Just what do you make of the fit of those three guys? Can you run it back with guys all making more than 30 mil when you lose the minutes?
Well, the making more than 30 million means they're really good players. And if you look at the teams that are still playing in the playoffs and will play deep into the playoffs, they all have multiple players that make a lot of money and are really good and can carry the team forward. So you certainly don't come at this with we're going to build around one of them. I think certainly anytime two of the three were on the court, we won those minutes. And when three of them were on the court, we tended not to. That has a lot to do with what we support that group with and giving them the ancillary pieces that help them thrive as well. And I think knowing now, because we've gotten to see the group enough what those things are, I think we'll be able to address some of that and get better that way. But certainly we have to be open to a lot of different things.
Do you think you need one or two more big difference makers to win the West?
I mean, I'd take 7 or 8 more difference makers. No, I mean, I don't know that it's difference makers as much as it is pieces that make the difference makers we already have fit better as well. You know, I mean, we've got the kind of players that everybody wants on really good teams. I think one thing you did see is that our secondary players, our ancillary pieces are very, very good and very well thought of. There's going to be a lot of room for growth for them. There was a period of time this year where Jordan Hawkins was, I think, second in Rookie of the Year balloting, and people thought we had absolutely stolen something. And he's somebody we're really excited about moving forward. He's going to be one of those difference makers eventually, we think. I think we have a lot of pieces that are that. A couple years ago, we would have said the same thing about Trey or Herb. So we have several pieces we can grow with. We have several draft assets that we're going to be able to use to leverage to get better. And I think, to your point, yes, you need more difference makers. But what you need is more people who understand exactly what's being asked of them on a regular basis as well. And we've got to do a better job of making that clear.
David, how motivated is the team in keeping Brandon Ingram? I know he's available for extension talks. He's got 1 more year left on his deal. And how do you compartmentalize his season he had this year? I don't know if you heard his comments last night, but he said for him it's the worst season he's ever had here in New Orleans.
Yeah, I saw his comments. I really appreciate Brandon because he takes so much personal responsibility for this and he cares so much. I also love the fact that he loves this franchise, he loves this city, and he wants to be here. And we're really grateful that we've built something people want to be part of. I think Mrs. Benson and her team should be very proud of what they've built, that we have so many guys that want to stay a part of this. At the same time, I think his willingness to take ownership of things makes you feel even better about the human he is. And that's the one thing I'm really proud of. I think we've gotten the people part of this right to an enormous degree throughout this roster, and I expect that will carry us through the summer as well.
And with him, is your feel that it's max or nothing? Like, could you see a world where he accepts less than the max?
I mean, we've never talked about it, and I haven't talked to him at all. I had a great deal of appreciation for what he tried to do in light of the situation and playing through what he played through and coming back in the way he did. He was really thrown into a difficult situation. I think Willie alluded to it last night, but to be injured for a month and come back and have to play in the crucible of playoff basketball, that's not easy for anybody. You'd like it to be. You'd love to just think it's plug and play and we're going to just plug in another superstar and carry on. But one of the things that Brandon and Z have had to do a lot of is carry the team when the other one is out. It hasn't happened very often that when that happened, they were both out and asked to carry the load. So I think it was a really difficult end of the season for Brandon, but it was difficult for everybody. I think CJ encapsulated a lot of that really well last night in his 20 minutes with you all. So
I know you since you got here, have kind of unapologetically talked about what you said, doing it the right way with the right people. And I think for those of us that have been here a long time, you see something that's more positive and tangible than it ever has. But when you kind of, maybe just overall philosophy, talking about contract extensions and how you handle people, how do you balance that with the person and who they are and your belief in them versus maybe raw analytics and stats, which may say something else?
Yeah, well, numbers don't say anything, to be clear. Numbers prove someone's point or they disprove someone's point that they're trying to make at any given time. Numbers don't give you any answers. The better you are with numbers, the better questions you ask. And I'm not convinced we've asked enough of the right questions yet, and we're going to continue to do that. But in terms of balancing what people think it looks like with what it should be, you're never going to pivot all the way to one side or the other. We're never going to pivot to, oh, well, it doesn't work, that can't work. Even if we made changes, we would make changes with similarly high character human beings that are about the right things, because that formula for us is solid. You know, I think one of the things, when you ask the question about the 49 wins, our foundation and our nucleus is really good. And again, we're competing in a historically good Western Conference. You come out of a series where a really, really good team sort of waylays you. It makes you think you won 9 games and not 49 games. The reality is we won 49 games and did a lot of really good things. And so I think you're never going to fall on one side or the other of that. It has to be all of it. It has to be the totality of all of those things. And I think to a fault, we probably erred on the side of continuity because we hadn't seen it. And I don't think we have to do that. But I also don't think there's any subset of numbers that is the answer.
With that in mind, you talk about how the team, does good with Brandon, BI, CJ, and Zion all on the court, but those spurt games where one is out or the other is out, they have to step up. How much does that push the lack of no complacency offseason and wanting to get maybe another star-ish player to come in and fill that void?
Well, I mean, again, we just talked about, and Christian asked the question about the 3 guys playing together. Those are 3 damn good basketball players. So you can go get 3 different stars and put them together. That's not necessarily going to work. There's a second apron tax team that got swept out of the playoffs too. There's a second apron tax team that didn't make the playoffs. They got a lot of star quality. So it's not that. It's you have to get the right fit of the right pieces at the right time. And as CJ said, to some degree, you have to get lucky. The thing that I think OKC has done incredibly well from a fit perspective is those kids got to develop and those young men got to develop in an environment where winning didn't matter for a couple years. And our team was consistently trying to win. So the development curve looks different and the trend line looks different. But if you look at what we've done, we went 36 wins, 42 wins, 49 wins. I mean, that's consistent year-over-year growth and development. That's exciting. The problem is we can't look at that and say we're home because the West is just getting so much better so fast. So I appreciate the question, and at the same time, I don't think this is more star quality necessarily. I think it's more fit and the right pieces.
What do you think of Zion's season as a whole?
Obviously, getting him to play a career-high number of games was exciting for us. And when I say getting him doing the work to get to that point was exciting. He did a remarkable job this year. I think coming out of the in-season tournament, he had seen a lot of what he needed to do better, and he really bought into that. I think the connection he had with our performance team was pretty profound in a positive way. I think we saw a lot of really good things on the court. I think probably for me the most disheartening part of his injury was you saw him take and make pull-up jump shots towards the end of his run there. And that was something that coaches have been encouraging him to do. And he was reluctant to do because he always feels like the best option is to try to shoot at the rim. And I think you saw so much evolution in his game that came from the evolution in his body and the work he put in. So we're really excited about where Zion is and where he intends to go.
This is a team that's publicly talked about wanting to take 43s a game. The players have talked about it, the coaches have talked about it. At some point, it becomes a numbers game with the personnel and stuff.
Yeah.
Just what are your general thoughts on, and I know there's no right arbitrary number of taking a certain amount of threes, but there was a strong correlation with your guys' wins and the number of you take. So just what are your general thoughts on, you talked about fit, just getting the right type of players in there to get some of those numbers up?
Yeah, I mean, I think the right number of threes to take is the number you have to take to make more than your opponent, right? So there were games we got outscored by 30 from the three-point line at times. That's not a formula for success, right? And at the same time, we were 6th in defensive rating, so we were taking away a lot of efficient shots in theory. I think offensively, it's, yes, you want to take more threes, but what you want is an offense that efficiently creates those looks. And I think you saw that even in the Oklahoma series. We had a lot of open threes. And guys who have made threes all year missed a lot of threes. And at the same time, they had guys who missed threes all year make a lot of threes. You want actions that yield good looks. And I think to a huge degree we had that. And I think we need to do a better job of getting people to lean into that shot and understanding that it's good for them. And again, the coaching staff worked tirelessly at it. I think they did a great job of improving both the number of looks we get from three and the quality of looks we get from three, and we just got to get to a point where we've got more of the right pieces on the floor to make them.
A lot of the conversation around the Pelicans is they need a pure point guard. What do you make of that line of thinking?
Yeah, I think having a pure point guard is great, just having more basketball IQ on the court in general. I think it's less about the specific of a pure point guard and more about overall basketball intelligence and approach to the game. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is a score-first point guard. I don't know that I call him a, quote, pure point guard, but they're getting the best, most efficient look on a real regular basis with the way they're running their stuff. So it can be predicated on one individual or it can be predicated on system, and I think we've done a little bit of both throughout our time. And yes, I would like more basketball IQ for sure.
Do you think Zion is on the verge of elite?
I think he's been fully elite and run through the door of that at times in his career. I think he's on the verge of being able to be sustainably available as elite, and that's exciting for us.
As far as just, I know everything's kind of a time and of a place. Just following up on that question, I know there was talk of like when it was Drew Holiday's team when you first got here, MVP candidate, and then BI being an all NBA type player. Is it maybe time to lean into Zion being that guy for this franchise and say the pieces around him are the most important thing?
I don't think you lean into one person ever doing that. I just don't think any team playing that intends to continue to play is going to think that they're built around one person. Denver can say they're built around Jokic, but Jamal Murray's the one making all the game-winning shots, right? So I think if you look at it, it takes multiple star quality players to win, and we've got to find the right fit of that.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.